Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and it's the time of the season to... Actually, it's earlier than usual to do this, but I feel like this is important because I feel like 10.1.5 might be kind of soon, and might start just smashing all over the old rankings and everything. So I figured now would be a good time to go and review the tier lists that myself and Tettles made over on the GG WoW YouTube channel at the start of the patch. Before we start these tier lists, there were a few small tweaks we made based on some last-minute tuning that came in. These tier lists were created. There was one round of patch notes after these tier lists were created, but before the patch came out. We made some updates to the actual Wowhead tier list, but we didn't adjust the videos. So that was stuff like Unholy actually jumped up to A and then back down to B as they nerfed the puzzle box or whatever thing. A or B was probably right for that. But either way, since then, there have been a few more balance changes that have come in, but mostly there hasn't been too much. They haven't changed too much about how good the different classes are. The changes that they've made have generally been fairly small percentage points, and so I feel pretty comfortable kind of reviewing these tier lists right now, and I'm worried if I waited longer, which I would usually want to do to have a better idea about what the metagame looks like, that something like 10.1.5 would land and would just completely shake everything up. So let's start by looking at the Raid DPS tier list. We put Demo and Destro in S tier, which... Oh, heck, okay, is this all the way done? Okay, no, let's go to the last frame here. There we go. We put Demo and Destro in S tier, which I think Demo in S tier makes sense. Destro also, I mean, if you look at the comps that people ran in the Raid, we can actually do that with old Warcraft logs. We can see what people played in the... So this is the Raid tier list, by the way. Raid DPS tier list, not M+. But if we were to look at the race, I think we can see comps on the front here. Yeah, so 2 demo, 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 1 demo, 2 demo. A lot of demos on old Sarkareth so far. And then these people didn't... Yeah, so... Nobody's played Destro on Sarkareth, but everybody played Demo. But now could be a part where we look and see if on other bosses people were playing any Destro. So Echo of Neltharion. We're also seeing Demo, 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 Demo. Pretty sure Magmarax is also a Demo encounter. Zaskarn, I think, was a Destro encounter. Yeah, triple Destro, double Destro, double Destro, triple Destro. I feel pretty happy about Demo in S. Destro maybe would have been a better fit for A rather than S, because it wasn't used on as many of the hard fights, although it was very good on Zaskarn, on like Amalgamation Chamber, but you used Demo, especially if you had access to the Exodia combo of the Class Trinket, the Iridius Fragment, the Power Infusion. Demo was pretty hard to get away from, but I'm pretty happy with this being the S tier and with not a bunch of other stuff being in the S tier, because again, if we look at the comps here, you know, the only other stuff that, like, among the top 4 guilds, Demo is the only spec that every guild played multiple ofs in here, right? Like, there's 2 guilds played 2 Arcane Mages, 2 guilds didn't. 1 guild played 2 Unholy DKs, 1 guild played 2 Devastation Evokers. Every guild actually played 2 DPS Warriors, but not all of them picked the same classes, or picked the same specs for those, right? Everybody played 1 Enhance, 2 guilds played an Ellie, 2 guilds didn't, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that's different between these comps, but man, the whole top 10, except for Conspiracy, played double Demo. So I think definitely best spec. This looks good. Dev Evoker at the top of A, I like that a lot. One Dev Evoker was in pretty much every comp, and 2 Dev Evokers are in the World First. That spec is really, really, really good. My guild hard swapped to a second one as well during the second week of the tier, and that worked out well for us as well. That spec is insane, so happy with that. MMA is probably aggressive. That should have probably been B or maybe C. The spec was not actually very good, and not a lot of top guilds included one. How far down do we have to go to locate a hunter, actually? Hang on. This might take a while. Hang on. I know you'll get there if we get to the second page and you find my guild, but... Okay, there's one. Wait. These guys haven't finished yet. Oh. Wait, Vesper finished. Oh, congratulations, Vesper. Okay, they just finished right now. So congratulations to them. Where... Wait, is this NA? I'm so confused. What's going on here? Well, there's a lot of guilds that are missing, I think, on this list right now. But But yeah, okay. Anyways, either way, some MM hunters are showing up further down here, and yeah, that's that should have been lower than A. Arcane, A, I think makes sense. Fire, kind of like Destro, was only used on Zaskarn, so probably B makes sense there. Moonkin was definitely not A. Moonkin was begrudgingly brought to be Mark of the Wild, so that should have been lower as well. A lot of guilds used 1, a lot of guilds didn't. Nobody used 2 unless they had, 2 insane Moonkins or something like that. Sin Rogue was wrong. We got the Rogue specs wrong, which ones were going to be good. Not a lot of people used double Rogue or anything, though. Rogue looked pretty good on early fights, but it wasn't particularly good on Sarkareth. So I think sub up in A or B makes sense. Either way, Sin should have been lower than sub, and Outlaw should have been lower than sub as well. Outlaw probably should have been higher than Sin as well. So I think you can make an argument for just swapping Sin and sub and calling this a day. Enhance up in A. Enhance only was ever used as a one of, but it was used as exactly a one of. Everybody had one Enhance. A seems like a reasonable place for that in this tier, given that there weren't a lot of specs being stacked. Rep Pally in B, pretty happy with this. Rep Pallies were used by some, but not all guilds. Rep Pally here, no Rep Pally here. Rep Pally here and here. Here, not here. Not here, here. Yeah, a little bit more than half, actually. Seems reasonably good. Unholy DK, yeah. Unholy DK, maybe A is more appropriate for that. They were used, most people used 1 and some people used 2. Frost Mage, not super popular. Frost DK actually, surprisingly, does very high damage, but it did just get a buff after this. I think probably now it's like high B, low A. Mid B was probably fine for it before, but maybe this is a sleeper spec the whole time. Shadow Priest in B is interesting. Shadow Priest is something where almost every guild has used 1 Shadow Priest as well, right? 1 Shadow Priest, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, right? Everybody's got 1 down to the top 7 of what's currently showing on Warcraft logs, which again, I think is missing some guilds. I think something's gone weird with the Warcraft logs site, but at least their top 4 is accurate. And yeah, my guild actually played 2 of this, and spec does a lot of damn when you factor in the power infusion, so maybe A would have been appropriate for that as well. Havoc in B, everybody only ever played 1 Havoc, but you did see pretty much everybody playing exactly 1 because they didn't want to play the Vengeance DH. But yeah, this one, I think it's hard to say, right? Like if we want exactly 1 to be A, maybe Havoc should have been up there as well. We already talked about Outlaw. The 2 DPS warrior specs were both good, and a lot of people played 1 of each or 2 total warriors on Sark. So it's possible again that here as well, maybe this just means top of B for both of them. When we say top or bottom of B, the thing is the list it's kind of loose whether on any given time where actually the placement is, like the ones near the left are the better and the ones near the right are worse. I try and do that whenever I'm making them, but we don't always adhere to that. So either way, yeah, warrior specs, both good. DPS warrior, good. Ellie Shaman in C, maybe a little bit low. Neither of the top 2 guilds used it, but 3 and 4 both did. They did only use 1. Playing more than 1 would be very hard to fit into your raid because they don't bring a raid buff, and you just have so few spots available for specs like that. But it does do a lot of damage, and the damage profile of like the ad spawns on Sarkareth P2, P3 work out very nicely for it. Feral, nobody's used any kittens to kill Sarkareth yet, I don't think. Maybe 1 or 2 have by now, but yeah, I mean, this is kind of a good tier for it as well. The damage is like slightly better than Boomkin, and it brings Mark of the Wild, but it's just melee instead of ranged. You're not bringing Beam, which is a nice piece of Boomkin utility on Sark. You're not bringing just like the same job-doing ability that Boomkins have to grab a bomb and go downstairs and always be super helpful. Aflock actually, so this I think took some buffs between the list and now, but is also a good Warlock spec that is not that much worse than like Destro, and is, I think, something you'd use in some cases, especially post-recent buffs. So always hard to tier a spec that when there are like better versions available, because even if stuff's only a little bit better, it'll be a lot more frequently played among top-end players. Serve Hunter down here in C. Serve probably shouldn't be a full tier below MM. If anything, maybe it should be in the same tier as MM. I actually think Serve is quite good and competitive with MM. It does suffer from being in melee. BM saw actually a little bit of use, but not very much at all. A few people use it on Zaskarn. Let's see. Yeah, Zaskarn. Liquid played it. Echo played MM. Method played BM. FSY played MM. Conspiracy played MM. So BM did see a little bit of use on that fight, although that fight's movement is like a quintessential BM encounter. So it's like best possible circumstances for a spec like that. But D was maybe a bit too low. And then Windwalker, I think, is an appropriate D tier spec. Very few people used Windwalkers this tier, even though the kit lines up actually really well against stuff like the Sarkareth ad spawns. This is just tuned to not be particularly competitive, and so nobody really used one. Looks like, okay, Conspiracy used one on Zaskarn. Method used one also on Zaskarn, but when we switch over to Sarkareth, let's see if we see any of these showing up at all. We see no. It's just no Windwalkers to be seen. Oh, there's one. Okay, Conspiracy continued to play theirs all the way up through Sarkareth. So, okay, one in the top 10. You know, could be worse. All right, so that's the raid DPS tier list. A few things that were one tier off. I think the biggest miss on this list is the rogue specs, Sub and Sin. To be fair, Sub was like super bugged on the whole PTR cycle, but that was still a pretty big miss. Overall, though, I'm pretty happy with the texture at the top of this list. I think the Warlock call was good. The Dev Evoker call was good, especially after a tier where it wasn't played. Yeah, a lot of the specs that were tiered too highly did at least have one fight that they shined on, like Destro and Fire. Let's take a look at the healer list. So over on the healer list, we had there's an obvious miss here, right? Disc and Holy should have swapped places. And Holy Paladin also probably should have been up in S. The way that healing has actually shaped up this tier is one Holy Paladin and two Holy Priest is a pretty core choice that almost every guild made. So if we look at Scale Commander Sarkareth, there's that core, and then Liquid played a Resto Druid. There's that core, and then Echo played a Mistweaver. There's that core, and then Method played a Resto Shaman. There's that core, and then BDG played a Mistweaver. There's the core with the Resto Druid, Resto Shaman, Preservation Evoker. Here's the first. So honestly, down in World 9th is the first guild to deviate and only play one Holy Priest. But this to me speaks that, yeah, Holy Paladin, Holy Priest should have been S tier. And then probably everything else should have been like B tier. Disc Priest, maybe. Very few people ever played Disc Priest. Disc Priest is probably the biggest. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the single biggest miss for us in terms of tiering in this patch was Disc is like 3 tiers too high because I was just never better than Holy in any cases, which, yeah, that's a big miss for sure. Okay, actually, let's just do tanks. Let's stay in raid and then we'll go to M+. Here's our raid tank tier list. This one, I'm very happy. I'm happy with how this turned out. We have nothing in S tier. Maybe you could make an argument that Prop Paladin is S tier. A lot of people used him, but honestly, not even everybody used a Prop Paladin. Prop Paladin, Brewmaster, and Blood DK are our top tier tanks. What do we have? Top 4 guilds all used Paladin and Brew. Paladin Brew, Paladin Brew, Paladin Brew, Double Paladin, DK Bear, but that's just honestly Paladin Brew. So Paladin Brew was being used by almost everybody on the top fights. You have to get down to XD to see a DH, which you'll note is in our B tier. And then if you look at like Zaskarn, which was a lot of the reason that I put DK high, was that like, hey, you're going to want one of these for this fight. Everybody has a Blood DK on Zaskarn. So that spec had at least one fight that you just needed to prep one for. So you could make an argument that this should have been like Brew and Paladin and S, and then DK and A. It's always weird when you have a tier like this where it's like, oh, this is a situational spec, right? DK is I'm gonna dismount my stupid thing so that it stops, roaring at us. Sorry that that's been going on. Yeah, the DK, it's used on exactly one fight, right? But almost everybody did use a Blood DK on that encounter. So maybe should have been lower than Brewmaster and Paladin, which were a very dominant tank combo. Paladin, very good. Blessing of Protection and or Spell Warding had unbelievably high value on the hard fights of this tier, on Scale Commander Sarkareth and Echo of Neltharion. That was really, really, really good to have access to. And also it brought you a second Paladin buff if you weren't playing the Ret Pally and you need 2 Paladins in your raid this tier. Brewmaster brought you your Monk buff because a lot of people didn't use a Mistweaver and nobody used a Windwalker, so you needed a Brewmaster to provide that. The B tier, Vengeance, like I said, that spec looked good. Is, I think, going to be good in M+ this time around, but didn't compete for that spot. Warrior and Bear, very rarely used. Again, outside of Honestly, who would always, basically always play that Bear and always look good on it. So, yeah, pretty happy with the tank tier list. On the M+ side of things, it is early in the season to make any assessments, but I'm going to make some anyways because I feel like if I don't make them now, the season could be shaken up within a very short amount of time. So let's take a look at Raider.io for keys 20 and up and see what is going on here for DPS. So we said Shadow Priest S tier. Shadow Priest is the second most popular spec here, with Ret Pally actually being the most popular, but look at this front page. So compare, this is plus 20 and up. I guess we could change this to plus 25 and up. All of a sudden, Shadow Priest is now a dominating spike here. So Ret Pally is a very popular spec. A lot of people are playing it. It's a lot of fun. People love Ret Pally whenever it's close to good, and it is good right now. But Shadow Priest is actually insane. Look at our front page here. Every single group except for this one, and this one are playing a Shadow Priest. So Shadow Priest, I think S, that was a good call. On the DPS side of things, let's see if we can spot all the other things that we have up in S. So Fire Mage, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A lot of these are the same people. We have one playing Frost, but mostly playing Fire up in the top. And again, if we look at our 20 and higher keys, actually Fire is pretty unpopular compared to Frost there. But if we look at 25s and up, again, this sample size is starting to get very small, but Fire is now overperforming Frost up there. So pretty happy with where we placed the Mage specs. And then Arcane is basically never being used for high-level keys, although I think in theory it actually would maybe be good. It's just very few people, I think, can play it in those super high keys. The Warlock specs, we put both Destro and Demo in the top tier. They're both popular in the 20 and up range. At the 25 and up range, nobody's playing Demo, and only a few people are playing Destro, but again, small sample size. But you don't see any of them in our world top 20 keys either. So maybe A is a little aggressive for them. Feral Druid, not showing up in popularity just yet, but balance is. And we're seeing a balanced Druid, 2 balanced Druids in our top 20. So maybe this is more suited to like B for balance and C for Feral, C for Kitten. Dev Evoker we have up in A. We have 2 different Dev Evokers in our top 20, and that spec, I think people don't play it yet, but I know people are gearing it. I know of, at least anecdotally, 2 of my M+ friends are gearing up Dev Evokers and just didn't have them ready for this season. So I think we're going to see that grow in popularity, and I would still bet on them being A. Ret Pally in A. I like that. It's a very popular spec by popularity, especially in the mid-key level range. It would be S+++. But I do think it's not like mandatory for group comps in the way that Spriest with their Mass Dispel kind of is. Here again, we made the mistake of thinking it wasn't going to be Sub-Rogue. Sub-Rogue probably could be an S tier spec. All of these rogues are playing Sub. It's not Outlaw. It's not Sin. Sub should have been up higher. Sin and Outlaw should have been lower. It's, again, you have this hard challenge of like, in a world where you're allowed to play Subtlety, you're not going to see, like, you can't get, if Subtlety is the best and you have 20 people playing Subtlety Rogue, right, that gives you no information about how good, say, Assassination is relative to Outlaw. That's a question that's very hard to answer, and when you're making a tier list like this, you're just never, it's really hard to come up with what you're going to do about specs like that, about, like, the 2 less popular versions of Rogue, for instance. If I had to guess, I would guess that Outlaw is more valuable than Sin, but anybody who's playing Rogue and high keys is probably going to be playing Sub. So yeah, Sub all the way up into S or into high A would have been appropriate. And then probably Outlaw, I don't know, B, Sin, C, something like that. Ellie Shaman and Enhancement Shaman, we both put in A. If we look at the Shamans on our leaderboard here, Enhance, 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 Ellie, Enhance, 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 or sorry, Ellie, and Enhance. So Enhance is definitely showing up to be more popular. It's twice as popular in the 20 and up range, and it is 3 times as popular in the 25 and up range, but both are showing up. So I think I still like Ellie being an A. You could make an argument for B. Enhance in A is definitely right. And then we put Fury up in A and Arms in B. Fury is way more popular than Arms in the 20 and up range, and also in the 25 and up range. And we see multiple different people playing Fury up in the top keys, but somebody's doing Arms as well. So I think, yeah, Fury A, Arms B. That's probably feeling good about that. The DPS DKs we put into the B tier. There are no DPS DKs on the front page here, and one run at 25 and up has been done by a DPS DK, and they're very unpopular in the 20 and up range as well. So if anything, maybe these should be lowered to C. I'm not sure. I mean, I really like DPS DK. I like playing it, but it's not. People are not doing it a lot now. It's also historically not been very popular, so it may be a similar case to like Dev Evoker, where maybe it's underrepresented in terms of how good it would actually be. But, especially with the way that affix weeks work right now, you don't have a soothe for raging, you can't interact with incorporeal, you can't interact with afflicted. So it's kind of cursed this season, I think, as well. Havoc we put in B. Havoc we've got one person showing up in the top 20 playing Havoc, but Havoc is very popular in the 20 and up range. It's one of the more popular specs. In the 25 and up range, it's also doing pretty well in popularity. A lot of people play Havoc in M+. It's been a spec that's often been good. And the Chaos brand, even in a 5-player content, is still a lot of damage. And they bring Cage. Cage is a really good answer to incorporeal, but also just high value year-round. Marksmanship, Windwalker, we put in B. Now, Windwalker is seeing a little bit of popularity in the 20 and up range, and also some people are playing it in the 25 and up range. You see one in the top 20, but not something that's hugely popular up there. But honestly, with how bad this spec is in Raid and how few people are going to be gearing them early season as a result, I actually think I think the spec is still a good M+ spec, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a good choice, especially on these fortified weeks. I don't think you'll see them in especially like in the Great Push. I don't think anybody will load up a Windwalker on a tyrannical key, but we'll see. Maybe the spec gets buffed by then. And then MM Hunter. So we have the Hunters, we put all of them pretty low. MM above Serve, above BM. So if we look at our top keys, you can see Hunters are doing fairly poorly in the 20 and up range, although not the worst of the classes. And it's MM and then BM and then Serve. But if we look at the 25 and up range, people are actually playing Serve. That's the only spec that is really... sample size is horrifically small. But from personal experience, I would say I actually think that Serve is on par or maybe better than MM. Maybe something like Survival to B. Honestly, when it's been played well, I feel like it maybe even could be low A. And then MM also staying in B or maybe down to C. BM, I'm not sure if it's as bad as D. I'm not sure if it is, but maybe just up to C, something like that. Then we have Arcane. Yeah, happy with where that is. Sub, obviously, we already talked about. Aflock, also not something that anybody's playing in keys right now, so reasonably happy with where we placed that. Although, I think it maybe isn't even as bad as this. I don't know. Like, I definitely wouldn't want it in D. And yeah, we'll see. There are already, of course, buffs for this spec coming in 10.1.5. But we'll see if this is something that anybody uses before then. I guess my guess is probably no, so reasonably happy with this. So, how did all the tier lists do? 10.1 M+ DPS tier list, happy with. Rogues were a problem. Pretty much everything else was within a tier or half a tier of where it was supposed to be. And I think there were some things that we had good insight on that were not, super... it's not like it was just the same meta as last season. There were some changes that came with this season that we got right. Tank tier list, happy with again as well. I feel like this was also a pretty accurate read of what things would go. And if you actually go and watch through this video, I basically got everything right about what would be used. Raid, this was probably... The structure fundamentally is pretty different here. There was basically a strict meta of 1 Holy Paladin, 2 Holy Priests, and where those are on this list does not reflect that. So this list was quite bad. And then the DPS raid tier list, also quite good. Again, some things you could quibble with by a tier. The rogues were in the wrong spots as each other, but most stuff and the broad strokes of it look pretty good. Especially if you factor it, like if melee, some of the melee are maybe half a tier better than we tiered them. We thought the tier was going to be more melee unfriendly than it actually was, and that factored in, maybe takes the warriors, the paladin up a tier or something, or the fire mage, the balance druid definitely down, the hunter down maybe 2 tiers. But overall, I think a pretty successful season for tier listing. Not as good as our Vault of the Incarnate tier list for sure. Those were, I think, remarkably close to what the meta ended up being, but pretty good. Better than all the other tier lists I saw still that came out this time around. And it's always just really fun to do these things. It's my favorite thing is to, my life's work is to talk about video games, right? And it's exciting. It's fun. It's fun to talk about video games with your friends. And I think tier lists are kind of a way of turning that into a video that people can sort of take part in, and you talk about what you think is going to be good and why. And I think that's really interesting and fun. There's always discussion around tier lists about, if they're inaccurate, they're causing some kind of harm, or even if they are accurate, that people are getting invited or uninvited based off of this. I will say that I think a lot of times the cause and effect is reversed here, and the community perception of stuff often is completely unrelated to tier lists. Often there's stuff that we call in a tier list 6 months in advance or whatever, and that the community perception is very slow to realize is good. Stuff like potentially Dev Evoker this time around. And yeah, I mean, I always say if people are using these lists to invite or uninvite people or force their friends to reroll, that's a horrific misuse of them. But I think that, you shouldn't negotiate with terrorists and not make interesting content because some people are going to misuse it. And also, if you yourself ever are using tier lists to decide what to re-roll to, again, these are just our takes on what might be good. Yeah, often they're pretty right, but, we get a lot of stuff wrong, and if you use this to decide on one of those things, that can get you in the end. It's not like there's necessarily a better way to know what's going to be good a month before the patch, but besides playing the PTR a bunch yourself, which honestly, if you're trying really hard to min-max, yeah, you should do that. If not, you can almost always, especially when Blizzard's doing their job right, you can almost always play anything and play it well and be a very high valuable person on your team. This tier, I think this is one of the best tiers for that to be true. I think with the exception perhaps of this D tier and Raid, if you main any of these specs, especially any of the SA and B specs, I think you're in 100% of prog. Again, with the exception of maybe the rogues reversed or whatever. I think you could earn your spot very easily, and every comp, there was a lot of compositional differences among even the top 4 world teams. A lot of different stuff was getting used, and so Blizzard's balance was good. I think the biggest mistake that they made was Windwalker. I think that one is one that was egregious and everybody was talking about for months leading up to the tier. And I think the problem with specs like Windwalker and Feral is they're in this really rough predicament where the PvP and PvE identity and value of these different abilities in their kit are so different that it's just so hard for them to buff Windwalker or Feral for PvE without making them insane in PvP. So I hope that they look at maybe adding some more PvP and PvE separate values for those specs, or doing some reworky kind of action to try and address that, because it feels like those specs are often in this situation where they have a really hard time buffing them because of how they are already quite good in PvP and how their buttons fundamentally work so well in that game mode. Anyways, those are just some of my thoughts. Let me know what yours are down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.